you started your career at a library, which is a very different origin story from most people in AI. How does that show up in the work that you do?
Having the curiosity into the what is driving the desire and wishes really helped me a lot as I get into conversational AI.
There's so much fear around AI that AI will take up a lot of jobs. Now the question becomes philosophical, like what would humans be doing now?
I don't want to replace human labor. I think human labor is super important, but I do want to make human labor less of a burden. I want to enable people where they can get back to the good task of like figuring out smart problems and helping customers. I had a lot of experience for years doing things like an IRC with bots, and I messed around with automations and scripts. So I knew like it had idea, but I didn't really understand how much Slack would become part of workplace culture. If you're going to use AI in the system, you need to make sure you're not automating things at scale that are already a problem. You may have a problem in the way that you work today, but it's only like, oh, okay, I can only do it 20 minutes at a time problem. But when AI does it, it's going to do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then you'll see what a big problem it really is.
Big dreams don't come quietly. They demand risk, they demand fire, they demand crazy transformation. Welcome to the corporate life. Hosted by Hina Siddiqui, CEO and founder of Corporate Influence Media and creator of the Let's Make You Famous 90-Day Celebrity Campaign and media strategist featured across 600 plus global outlets. Join us as we sit with million-dollar entrepreneurs, tech CEOs, and celebrities who share the scenes that shape them. Here, success isn't a headline. It's a human story. The turning points, reinventions, failures, breakthroughs, and bold decisions behind their rise. Because your life is a movie too, and you're the star of yours.
Peter, you started your career at a library, which is a very different origin story from most people in AI. So, what did working in a library actually teach you about how people find and use information, and how does that show up in the work that you do?
I think the number one thing it taught me is the reason why people ask the question is usually very, very interesting. Like people come up and they'll say, you know, who batted third in the 1967 World Series or things like that. And the reason they're asking is a very interesting story behind it. And having the curiosity into the what is driving the desire and wishes really helped me a lot as I get into conversational AI because especially as a consultant, because people come to me and they'll say, "Oh, we need to do X," and it's like, "Well, why do you need to do X?" It's like, "Well, we're using three different things and it forced us to do X," and it allows you to kind of pick things apart and like, oh, well, maybe let's not add to that confusion and go back and refactor that need and desire and figure out how to do things. And I find that people like feel like they don't have time to do that when we call like tech debt and all that. We were talking about like, okay, I know that's a problem. I know that's on fire, but I'll put it out someday. And one of the benefits of like, you know, AI assisted programming and things like that is you can do things very quickly and you can try things out and you can decide like, oh, maybe there's a better path than having to do X.
Hmm. Yeah. So working in a library makes you more curious, and then you start asking better questions and you start being more curious in the age where people want to just talk about, like, the listening skills are not very good these days.
For sure. For sure. And I think like um sometimes you can solve the problem and you just create another problem farther down the line because you
Yeah.
didn't address the problem that caused the problem. And so I think like, it's like a leaky boat. You can fix one leak, but if the other leak is farther down the pipe, then you have to go fix that leak. Otherwise, they'll just keep coming. And
Yeah.
there's a bit of like sunk cost fallacy, especially with technology, where they're like, well, I have this huge infrastructure. I talk to clients who have like a computer under their desk who has an uptime of 15 years. And that uptime of 15-year computer is a good source of all their business. And they couldn't possibly migrate it because then they have to turn it off for a minute and their business will stop making money for 2 days or 3 days. And so how do you take problems like that and use AI to like slip out of the mistakes of the past? I think is really like an unexplored avenue.
Yeah, so being curious and asking questions so you come to the right kind of problem that can be solved, instead of just uh, building something that is a complete mess up.
Right. And I think there's like a lot of like SaaS middleware providers in the world that kind of exploit this. So you have like, you have email, but then you have the email has to go into the chat room, and then the chat room has to go into printing the receipt in the warehouse. And there's all these different providers and software tools that accumulate when it really just comes to like if someone person can just open email and send the product, right? And we kind of like build these things like according to our org charts, like how our company's made up, but it's like we construct things down. It's just like create, read, update, delete, all the way up at organization. So,
Yeah. You were building automation tools before automation was even a buzzword.
mm.
What problem were you trying to solve at the time, and when did you realize you might be working on something bigger?
I think it started out like I started out a lot in like a startup world and stuff like that. And really it's like that is more the place where you wear many hats. And so you're doing things that aren't part of your normal job. So you're looking like, well, I don't want to spend all day reading 300 support emails. I do, but I don't want to have to spend all day doing it. So how do I automate replies and tag things and make sure that things important get attended? And that's when I started getting into automation. And I think a lot of the tasks that we're looking at, instead of like I don't want to replace human labor. I think human labor is super important, but I do want to make human labor less uh, of a burden. Of like, there's people who just they will read emails and they'll copy and paste emails into a spreadsheet, and then another person on the team will copy paste the emails from the spreadsheet into a PowerPoint. And there's all this like invisible labor that happens that is like not productive. And these are kind of tools and tooling that I want to enable people where they can get back to the good task of like figuring out smart problems and helping customers and things like that.
Yeah. So automating stuff was important because it actually was a problem, but now people are fearing it. People are so there's so much fear around AI that AI will take up a lot of jobs, and now the question becomes philosophical, like what would humans be doing now?
So,
What do you think?
so I think one, if people who control the supply of labor in terms of what they hire and want to lay off people, they'll find a way to lay off people. And I think AI is a convenient excuse for a lot of people who may have overhired during the pandemic, or they've mishired, or they misjudged the market, and they're trying to make up for that with AI practices. And the burden of that really falls on the employees who are left behind. And so I think I think it's a very real threat that people will use AI as an excuse to get rid of labor. And I also think if there's strategic, depending on how you fit in this world, there's the people that are strictly like load bearing personalities that are at risk. You know, there's definitely people whose job is to copy and paste stuff from things to other things.
Yeah,
And so that is a deeper societal problem, I think, of like,
yeah.
should there be things like universal basic income and support for people and the unhoused and all that? Absolutely. I think those are those are important issues. But I think AI should be viewed as a force multiplier, because without humans to shape it and structure it and prevent it from doing bad things, it's pretty useless. Like we've seen like many stories of people walking to court without a lawyer because AI wrote their deposition, and the judge laughs them out of court or fines them or they get disbarred. And that comes down to just like expertise and understanding technology. And I don't think there's no AI that we've yet to see a unicorn company vibe coded from AI. And I think there's a hidden human labor behind all this tooling that uh, is still required to make these things successful.
And I think that this bubble is going to force people to come out of their mediocrity zone and be more creative and more efficient. Because I have been in the corporate jobs, and I have seen that people just do just enough to save their jobs. So now is the time to just level up the game and be your own creative and best self, I think.
For sure, for sure. Like if you can do 40 hours a week with one client, and you could do that work in 10 hours a week, should you just not tell the client and charge them same rate? Or should you charge them, okay, this is really a 5-hour job. But I think the people that are going to be most rewarded by this are, like you said, the people who are naturally curious. The kind of developers and people who like love doing unit testing and like submitting bugs on code that they didn't write. And those are like, there's always going to be opportunities, I think, for people like that.
Yeah. And AI is going to help us in the long run, and the hustle culture is going to be replaced. This is what I see. Like, people are so much into hustle, like hard work and that kind of stuff. So when you have the AI kind of tools to help your work, and then you have enough time, and if you know how to use the AI tools correctly, and to produce better efficient results.
The people who work for me, we try to do 4-day work week. And if you get your work done, like, you have that time back, I think. Like if
Yeah.
it as an employer, like I'm less concerned with like fully utilizing my 40 hours a week. Uh, and if they can find a cool way to like cut 10 hours out of their day or 10 hours out of the month or 20 hours out of the month, they should enjoy the fruit of that with being able to work on whatever they want to work on. Because, it's almost like like SLA commit. Like it's like I'm going to book you full time and you're in your full time, you're going to do but if you figure out a better mousetrap, you win, and I'm happy because the client's happy, and you can work on your game project, or you can work on your side hustle, or you can just watch Netflix for all I care. I think
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
lot. There's a lot of like, especially like in tech companies, there's that grind set, 10x engineer culture, where if your passion is like Pokemon cards or you know doing this or why, you should be allowed to do it. And if it gets better work out of you, I'm more than happy to facilitate that.
Hmm. Peter, WhatKit launched with the Slack API and became the tool developers used to turn Slack into a work platform. Take us back to that moment. Did you know it was going to be that significant?
Um, I had a lot of experience for years doing things like an IRC with bots, and I messed around with automations and scripts, so I knew like it had idea and legs, but I didn't really understand how much Slack would become part of workplace culture. And we had a bot in the store called Howdy, and Howdy was usually a regular stand-up bot, and all it asked was 3 questions, and you can design the 3 questions, and then answers came back. And that was such a huge cultural impact for people in the first couple months of using Slack because it became a sounding board. People would like Republican Party and the Democrat Party and the UN and the Grammys and all these companies using this tool, and all the feedback was very, very amazing because it was like, okay, cool. With a little bit of work, a non-technical person can learn something that's very technical and one click into their work process. This is technology as a social multiplier. You don't need to go to college for 4 years and learn to get a degree in Python or whatever to learn how to use these tools. In fact, a lot of the people who became experts and contributors to open source product were first-time developers. GitHub named us one of the top 10 new projects for first-time developers because when I wrote the documentation with my partner Ben Brown, we made sure we didn't assume any knowledge. We don't assume how to use JavaScript or what a webhook is, whatever. And we made sure you link to it. And we hung out in a Slack all day that anyone can join and ask questions. And I think that was like a really interesting peek into like, why do, like, if an AI assistant came into your workplace and you can just ask it a quick question and it found the information for you and wrote the answer, it'd be wonderful. But they're not really working that way because uh, one, the data is messy and no one does everything the same way. And two, they assume that everything will work the same as it does in the demo on stage. And so that was like a real insight for me. You know, I would talk to people at Fortune 500 companies and then people in startups, and they all have the same problems. It's just scale problems, like it's time in the day and, too much work and not being able to find the answer. And so that really kind of like
Yeah. So how did
just,
that
it
moment
just
feel
slower.
in your body? Like, how did that feel in your body? Like, did you feel proud of yourself?
Well, it definitely like was the end of imposter syndrome for me, because I always like when we like that was a real unlocking of confidence in my life and my career, where it's just like, oh, this is just a guy and he's like trying his best and he's wrong, or I disagree with him and I have good reason to disagree with him, even though he is much more successful and much more accomplished than me. Like it was very because I'm seeing both measurable results, but I'm also like making the people that I would like to work with happier. Like I would hire that person
Yeah.
if they're on the market and I needed them, but they love my tool, so I can pretend like we work together.
Yeah. This is interesting. And you experienced a rare moment most founders never see, watching your product get absorbed into a tech giant like Microsoft. What actually changes for a product after an acquisition like that?
Well, the first thing is like the mandate becomes way different because like we would have sprint planning and we would come up with the idea on a Monday and ship it the following Friday. And in a big company, you come up with the idea on Monday and you ship it in June, or you, or you ship it in 3 months, or you ship it sometimes in next Friday because there'll be like an important reason to do that, or a client needs it, or all that. And so like that kind of like because like when you're turning a big boat through the Panama Canal, you can't make errors, and you have to plan the steer many many minutes before you need to execute the turn. And
Mm.
so I think it was kind of like a learning experience for me. Net positive, I think it's great to have a company supporting your users and providing technology and seeing your ideas kind of filter into other products organically. I think it was a net positive for the community. I miss open source software. I miss the startup days because it's great to have a lot of little wins and the occasional big win. But it's also nice to see like CEO of one of the top companies in the world with your product behind them on stage saying this is the future. So, it has its pluses and its minuses, but I think I think people who work for big companies or people going to startups, uh, the line's going to blur a lot because of the force multiplier, I think, of the technology is where I'm an individual and I have 2.5 developers, including myself, and I'm the designer, and I'm shipping things that a team of 16 people couldn't do or 25 people couldn't do because of all the planning and execution and uh, consolidation. But the fact that I only have to convince 3 people that something's a good idea and we can ship it quickly and see if it's a good idea or not is kind of our competitive advantage, I think. And a lot of people are going to start figuring that out.
So I would like to come back to that moment. Like, did it feel like you just made it and it felt like a big win and a dream came true, something like that?
It was a very interesting feeling because we had just come back from a luncheon where we decided that we were going to turn the company down. We were going to start winding down and stop full-time employment because we were having a really hard time. We found adoption and usage, and the community was very supportive, but our corporate benefactors weren't doing enough to keep and maintain the ecosystem. Like we had companies like Google using our product to demonstrate integration between their tools and Slack, another company that had supported us, and they didn't give us a single dollar for it, but it had 2 million views every month. And so coming back from that luncheon, decided, okay, we have to start looking for other things to do. Go back to being a consultancy or whatever. Microsoft called wanting to acquire the technology, and it was kind of like, oh great, a bridge to keep working on this, and very gratifying and rewarding. Um, but I think everything's so strange in tech, and you have to like suffer a lot of highs and lows and be able to roll with the punches because the thing you want to do may not be like the thing that gains traction or the thing that gets you acquired. And
Yeah.
eventually I did get hired back at Microsoft to work on the product that was the genesis of the acquisition product, and then a month later is reorged into a different product. And so like like I wasn't even working on the grandchild of my stack anymore. I was working on a new thing, and you kind of like, okay, well, here's what I know to be true, and here's the things that I know to be true exist in product X. So I'll just pivot over here and do the same problems in this playground.
Yeah. So did that get you a lot of money?
I mean, I was not a round, so like yeah, I had a good year that year, I'll say. And this is actually this is my second Microsoft acquisition. of a similar nature. Like I worked for a startup in the 2000s that was acquired and is powering the technology
Yeah.
behind Windows Update today. And like that was also like a thing where I ended up moving on to a different career opportunity afterward. I didn't join Microsoft at the time, and it's nice. I would love to have a job where I didn't have to worry about exits and interim, and I dream. I'm trying to run my consultancy like a plumber runs his business, or someone who's just okay. Here's the work we need to get 4 weeks out of the month and 12 months out of the year, and everyone can take 6 week vacations and all that stuff. So let's work towards that. And I don't want to do a unicorn exit. This is my company, my vision. I just want everyone to have an enjoyable work experience and go home and do whatever they want.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I also see, Peter, that we are living through a moment where every company says that they are an AI company, and the way everyone used to say that they were a social media company, it seems like we are in an AI bubble of expectations with a lots of startups coming up, like AI and SaaS, and it has become a trend. What do you think about it?
Well, I think that's a lot of the disillusionment with AI. Like, I was using ChatGPT yesterday, and it answered my question, and it gave me like this BuzzFeed kind of thing where it's like, "Would you like to know the 5 secrets behind blah 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 of the thing I just asked?" Him like, no, I wanted you to give it to me when I asked the question. Like, quit extending the prompt in the social media way. Like, I don't want to have a conversation. I wanted to get an answer. And I think that is kind of the disillusionment with AIification of products, where it seems like, oh, you're turning this into another social platform. So now I'm doom scrolling in Excel, or doing things in these products that just like, I just want to check the numbers, or I just want to run a function. And they kind of forgot like, their core purpose. Like, and I think
Mm.
a lot of people like this, they get really upset when AI comes in their product. It's because it's like getting a coworker who makes your work worse, or a coworker who comes in and like tells you you're doing things wrong when you know that to be untrue. And there's no way to turn it off, and there's no way to change the tone to match your tone. And it's just a really bad social contract. And a lot of products are much worse now with AI than they were with it. I think the only successful major product AI vacation I see is like meeting notes, or like doing things like transcribing a call, or finding out like, oh, who said they were going to do task X in the team meeting? Oh, it was Tommy. He said he'll have it done by Tuesday. So I can check on Tuesday and see if Tommy did it. And I think that really shows, one, it's a very low hanging fruit. It's easy to take a transcription and read it. But also like we're solving the wrong problems. Like, if you open up Microsoft Word, and I'm not picking on Microsoft, but every product's like that, and there's like 80 buttons. Do you know what all 80 buttons do on every screen? You don't, because they have to have 80 buttons for every 5,000 use cases the product supports.
Yeah.
And why can't AI, why can't I just have a blank page like a typewriter and say, oh, I need to make that bold, click bold? Like, why do I have all these things constantly to read, and the cognitive load of doing all those things? And the problem they're working on is, make you use the search longer, versus like changing the way we use computers. Like a computer could just be a blank screen and a microphone if they would let it, but they're just taking the old stuff and making AI a layer on top of the old stuff.
Yeah, I can see that. And you say that some problems are not ready for AI yet. What do you mean by that?
Um, I think like if you're gonna, I tell my clients this: if you're gonna use AI in the system, you need to make sure you're not automating things at scale that are already a problem. Like, you may have a problem in the way that you work today, but it's only like, oh, okay, I can only do it 20 minutes at a time problem. But when AI does it, it's going to do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then you'll see what a big problem it really is. So you need to really measure like how work happens, and you need to like understand like the implications of things before you wire in the system and become a beta tester for these new technologies and products.
Yeah. So it's like introduce the AI solution where it's needed and not just to force it into something that
Yeah,
humans
for
can
sure.
do
And
perfectly. For example, I also see that there are softwares where they're the salespeople, right? They're automated, and then they would call a certain number of people every day. Like they can obviously outnumber the people, the jobs that people do. And then it's like I don't think that I would like to talk to an AI person over an human on a call, on a sales call, or any customer support. What do you think?
No, I mean, absolutely. Like, I get hundreds of emails a day, and they're like, and you could tell they're obviously made by AI because they call me Mr. Toilville or they call me Miss Swim Peter or whatever the things that get wrong, and they tell a person to read it. It's like, why would I ever give my business to you if you don't even
Yeah.
care what emails you send? Think that is kind of like going back to what I was saying about like lawyers in court quoting stuff that doesn't exist. It's like, who would hire a lawyer like that? It's like, so like I have a real lawyer, I have a real designer. I don't generate the graphics in my company. I have a developer who works with me to make code, but we don't ship code we didn't use, read and review. And I think like that's also like it's kind of like a it's a very interesting moment because just because you have the access to a printing press doesn't mean you'll print something that's interesting to read, right? And you're seeing a lot of people who are using technology to amplify mediocrity at scale. And once we
Yeah.
kind of figure out, like, okay, how do we separate those people who you know, I read like, preprint archives are having 80% of made up papers being spammed in them. And we need to vent processes to like vet and verify and, trust people. It's like, okay, this is a real scientist writing a real paper. I'm only going to focus on people I can tell are this, and do that for music and film and software. Um, we're going to have a hard time of like figuring out like what's good and what's bad, and it's just going to eat up more of our time and cause more confusion and mistrust of things like the media and social media and all that. So
Yeah. Yeah. Peter, if a CEO listening right now says we need to become an AI company, what's the first thing they should actually do?
the first thing that I ask my clients, and they often don't know, is um, how do I work today? So, take a notepad and write like everything you do, just take a journal, stuff you do, and you'd be surprised how much time you spend on doing things that are like not part of your job. And I think those are like the short list of things you should consider automating. And it doesn't have to be with AI. There's been automation tools for dozens and decades of, we call them software applications. You can have a button on a software application that's reboot the server or send the email. And it doesn't have to be AI driven, doesn't have to be even connected to the internet. And there's a lot of low hanging fruit where you can use to like test these things. And the way we use AI in our company is we use it in kind of a white room and experiment with in a way that doesn't interfere with our business. And so like vibe coding is fine, but there's a point where you need to vibe it out and turn it into something that's trustable and authoritative. And that's the same old processes we've always had for making good software and books and media is a lot of editing and a lot of review and understanding of what you made.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Get ready for the ultimate challenge, this or that. Choose fast, trust your instincts, and let's go.
Now let's lighten things up and I will play a game with you. It's called This or That. And I would give you two options and you just need to pick one out of instinct. Are you ready?
Hit me.
Open source or proprietary systems?
I'd have to say open source only because like I'm very keen now. I mean, we talked about like slop and stuff about provenance. And so knowing where the stuff came from and what technology it is, and then working for big companies where you see where it came from and you understand like why things are bad because, you know, you use an operating system that is over 20 years old and there's stuff that was made by someone who left the company 20 years ago and you don't know why it works and why it's there. And a lot of people don't get the chance to see that in the software they pay for and buy. So open source software is very exciting to me because I can at least see like, okay, here's where my data is being sucked out to advertising, or oh, here's where I can optimize things and make things better and then give it back to community. So I definitely like open better than closed.
Automation or augmentation?
Augmentation all the way. we talked earlier about, just you can automate anything dumb, like uh, like those prank shows they used to have at MTV. You can have something that throws tomatoes at your villains, or you can do things that are bad or good. And augmentation allows a human to govern the process and know, oh, enough is enough, or this isn't working. And a person can say no. Like if they get an illegal order, or they get an unethical order, or they see something that doesn't feel right, they can say no. And automation will never say no when it's told to do something.
Engineers or product thinkers?
Um, I'm finding the lines are blurring, and like the best engineers now are ones who have some sort of like humanities hobby, like people who can understand structural problems, are and also make structure out of that, are becoming very, very important in the world of vibe coding, because I think there is like the mess around and find out kind of period where engineers can think of an engineering problem for any solution, but a artist can understand what happens to the soul when subjugated to that system. And so people can understand user stories and also technical requirements, equal amounts, are going to become very, very useful to companies going forward. And you even see like OpenAI is hiring poets and philosophers because they don't have enough people on their staff with a humanities background to understand these strange, non-technical things.
Speed of innovation or safety of systems?
I think they are both. Like there's there's no speed in which you should operate at which speed safety is mitigated. So, like in the systems of the tooling we make, we try to avoid trolley problems at the inception, so they don't ship in the product. They don't ship into a product. There's a French philosopher who says the ship was the invention of the shipwreck. So if you make a product that causes a negative outcome, it's on you to mitigate it or prevent it.
Human experience or machine efficiency?
This is also, I think, a both thing. Like I always tell people, they're always like, "Oh, you know so much about AI. I'll never know as much as you." It's like, listen, you with 5% of what I know about AI is going to be way more productive in your field than me with 5% of your knowledge through AI, because you know things in your brain, which is, human brain is the most sophisticated computer on the planet by a long shot, you know, and the result of 500,000 years of human evolution, and is capable of picking out a needle in a haystack of problems. And so what we need to do is find a way to automate the view of the playing field so the hay isn't constantly in the way and you just see the needles. And I think, automation is a tool to doing that. But, it'll never be a contactless, a humanless system, because, you're going to have mistakes. And if a system's unafraid of making mistakes, it shouldn't be put in charge of important things that can't be reversed.
Replace jobs or redesign jobs?
I think everyone has a right to a job. Everyone has a right to work. And there's so many things in our society that are underfunded because they're not like commercially viable operations that people could be doing. And so like uh you know, I sat in contact centers with like 300 people picking up phones all day. And is that a job that should exist? Uh, Maybe not. Like, people should, now people can go home and on the computer and pick up the phone. I feel that that's a net positive in terms of like work-life balance and all that. But like, you know, should there be no jobs is like a societal problem. Like we
Yeah.
need to like figure out, what people are to do with their lives. And we also need to like, if I'm a father and I have a family and I work full time and my wife works full time, we should be able to afford a house. We shouldn't have problems with insurance, or we shouldn't go bankrupt because one of us gets sick. And so these are all kind of like problems in the mix that when we talk about automation, um, we need to keep in mind that it's just like, yeah, companies want to fire people, they'll fire people. And if they refuse to hire people for certain reasons, you know, we need to use the tooling that they give us to make our own companies and do what we can to hire the people we think are important. And until those things are like stabilized as a society, there's going to be a lot of risk from AI disrupting society, as we've seen. I mean, the tech industry has laid off 500,000 people in the last year, and they're really coming hard down work from home and all these other perks that we got during the pandemic. And I think there is definitely kind of a labor versus management struggle happening right now. AI is just one facet of it. So, when you're out there like pushing AI and people say AI
Mm.
sucks, I hate
Yeah.
AI, that's all in there. That's all in the response. And you have to be cognizant of like, yeah, there are going to be people who refuse to use AI because of all that, the environmental implications and all that stuff. And, we have systems that are completely AI agnostic. We have systems that are computer agnostic. You can just use this process on a notebook. And I think there's going to be a spectrum of people that can benefit from process mapping and process management um, that will long survive this current era of AI and all the problems it has, I think.
Yeah. So redesigning jobs is a better solution, of course, because AI has to be there uh, to make things more efficient and productive. However, we cannot just replace people with AI. So the jobs need to be redesigned in a way that get the best out of them, like they can do what they are passionate about. So this is something like I think they can be a solution.
Yeah. And, I think, I was talking earlier about people with 20, 30 years in a job and how they just need a little AI. So maybe the engineer who was working as a team of 20 people is now embedded with that person, and together they're doing the work of 20 people for a not-for-profit or a small company. And so the person on one side is coming up with the problems and what would be cool if solutions, and the engineers there to facilitate that with AI. And so instead of like eliminating 10 jobs that were working before, we're funding
Yeah.
development in areas that were not even funded before because of austerity. Like, oh, we can never have accessibility at our companies. Like, well, now the accessibility person could just give the requirements to a computer and it'll make sure that every code that the person does is accessible. And then they can review it and all that. And so the thing that was once a liability before is now strength. And so I think people also need to like rethink of like, oh, we need to ship something in 5 weeks. We can't do that. It's like, well, we don't know what 5 weeks of AI coding
Yeah.
looks like yet. We don't know what we can or can't do. So why don't we just try and do as much as we can and see how much faster and better are we at it when we don't have to compromise on things that we think are not essential, like, you know, supporting sight reading software or, you know, being helping neurotypical people use our product, atypical people. And so instead of just optimizing for time and headcount, why don't we optimize for quality and iteration and safety, and then see how much time we have left? And if engineers are still twiddling their thumbs, then you could talk about like, oh, do we need to get rid of jobs or not? Because I think there's a lot of unconscious labor happening where the people left behind are doing 1.3 jobs now with the AI, and they're not all the gains from AI may just be people afraid of losing their jobs working that much harder.
Yeah. That's interesting way to put at it and look at it. Peter, if your life was a movie, which we believe that every life is a movie, and you are the star of yours as per season 3. So, what is the title of your movie?
Probably would be what about? And like half the problem, like I think the thing that made me less popular at big companies was like I would be in a meeting and they would say, well, we did a research study and 85% of the respondents said they liked X more than Y. And I'm like, well, 85%, that's a lot of people. That's an impressive number. How many people did you interview? And they'd be like 19 people. And it's just like I I can't help myself from asking framing questions to understand the context, because like a lot of times people throw numbers around and it doesn't mean anything unless it like means something. And that kind of like inquisitiveness can get you in trouble in a big company, but also like, I find it a very admirable strength in the company, pumping the brakes and understanding, okay, this feature is great for certain people. Who pays the cost? Is the company picking up the tab, or are we cutting out a segment of our customers, by applying this feature? Um, those are like things I think any technical person, even if they're not in a product or research thing, should be aware of when they're making stuff.
Right. For those who want to follow the rest of your movie, how can they do that? Where can they connect with you?
You can reach us at our website, toilo.com. We also made a easier to remember version of it, peoplemakeitbetter.com. So come there. Even if you don't want to be a customer of our services and you have a question, feel free to submit a message, and I answer all my emails. So no matter how silly or small, feel free to drop me a line.
Thank you for your time today. I really learned a lot from you, and it was a fun conversation.
For sure. Thanks for having me on.
This is The Corporate Life. More stories, more insight, more truth. Until the next episode, stay curious. Don't forget to subscribe.